Hello again, and welcome to another presentation on the SPSV Skills Development course. This is on Chapter 9, the manual that deals with your SPSV business and all matters to do with running a business as an SPSV provider. So now, let's look at the ways of working in the SPSV industry and the National Transport Authority's role in SPSV business operations. We're going to look at planning to become an SPSV operator, selecting the right business model for you, promoting your business, running your own business. There are many ways to work in the SPSV sector, in the taxi business. As a driver, you can obtain a driver license and drive a licensed vehicle that you yourself own or is owned by somebody else. If you already own a local area Hackney vehicle license, you can obtain a local area Hackney driver license and offer Hackney services in the area. As a vehicle owner, you can obtain a vehicle license, drive the vehicle yourself, or allowed to be driven by another licensed driver. The licensed vehicle specifies whether the vehicle can be operated as one of the 6 categories. Now, if you rent out the vehicle, you must inform the NTA. As a dispatch operator, you can obtain the dispatch operator license and you can take bookings for services or put in place a system for taking bookings and arrange for those services to be delivered by drivers with whom you have an agreement. Or a mix of the above. With the appropriate license, you can fill more than one of the above roles. Now, this part of the manual, this part of the presentation, concentrates on aspects of the sole trader business model, which is the most widely chosen model amongst operators. So the NTA's role in business operations, so they set standards for the provision of SPSV services, including vehicles. We know this from our previous chapters. They license vehicle for use as SPSVs. They administer the driver license after An Garda Síochána have issued them. They license dispatch operators, and of course they monitor compliance, investigate complaints, and where necessary will prosecute breaches of the SPSV legislation. Now, planning to become an SPSV operator, a self-employed SPF operator, what's a person's overall plan? So what is your overall plan for your business? How do you want to develop the market? Have you identified a market for your SPSV business? How will you promote your services? Your vehicle. Remember, it may be more expensive to run and maintain an SPSV than a private vehicle. And that's certainly true. And we'll talk about that later as part of the taxi cost index, but it's no harm in saying at the moment that there are grants available for electric vehicles. So, ultimately, like any business, we need to think about operating costs versus profit. So, have we calculated expected running costs and made an estimate of income? Will we be able to generate sufficient surplus profit to pay yourself enough to live on? Finance. What finance do we have? Can we raise enough to start the business? What about a business plan? And a business plan, so a business plan that you may present to your local bank or credit union, it will include headings like things about you, who you are, your background, your work experience, a resume, so to speak. What type of SPSV operation have you in mind? A driver with employees, a dispatch operator? Who are your customers? City centre shoppers, workers, customers, requiring accessible services, the wheelchair vehicles, transport terminals, airports, bus stations, train stations, corporate customers, all the way to late night revelers. What makes my business stand out from other SPSV operators? What's your unique selling point? This is the jargon now today when anyone is setting up a business. Maybe employing luxury cars, 8-seater cars, wheelchair vehicles, discounts for multiple bookings. Now, let's think about fares. Ultimately, it's about the selling price versus the cost price. How many customers do you expect to have during each shift? How many shifts? how much customers will pay you on average for each journey. It reminds me of a certain person who we all know, who shall remain nameless, who set up a bookmakers, and his part of his market research was to sit outside a bookies in Kilkenny and count the number of customers that went in there every day for a week. And he put an average then as to what they would spend. And of course, he was well able to predict that the customer left most of his takings there. So he was able to count how many customers and make a good estimate of what a high street bookie shop would make in. Ultimately, the bookmakers failed. But it is an interesting piece of market research to see how many boots are on the ground. What's the cost of each fare? So what do we mean by that? So the average cost to you of each journey, taking into account your fuel, your insurance, your tax I should say, vehicle maintenance and other expenses. Your startup finance, if a person has to borrow money, well, that's a cost. What do you need to start up your business, and your operating costs versus your income. Ultimately, is the SPSV business, in as much as you can predict, financially viable? Now, market research is crucial. In what area would you like to operate your business? What's the peak time for business in the area where you'd like to operate? What hours would you propose to work? Would you propose to operate your vehicle 24 hours a day? You might share it out with somebody or rent it out to somebody for the hours you can't cover. What contract work may be available? How could you secure contract work? Maybe from some of the local government bodies, you might be able to apply for contract work, which is always lucrative and secure. Are there dispatch operators in the area? What are their commercial arrangements? Is there an online booking service that operates in your area that you could become part of? Should you consider operating the business in partnership with another person? How could you promote your business in the area? So let's look a bit closer at financial planning. This is what's called the Taxi Cost Index, and it's really akin to the government's Consumer Price Index. So it's a methodology applied by the National Transport Authority to quantify the costs of running an SPSV, and it influences then the national maximum taxi fare. So what things are factored in are the national average wage in similar industries. Running costs are averaged out across the most common vehicles. Ancillary costs, finance to set up your business, taxi meters, etc. Here's an example. If we look at 2018, the costs in 2018, they were taken from a 2019 survey. So the average kilometrage was 42,000. Running costs of 5,662. There's fixed costs, labour costs. So the total cost, according to the taxi cost index of running an SPSV, is 42,973. So that's approximately 860 quid a week. And that's an increase of 4.18% on the previous year. So before you take in a red cent, that's the kind of cost one has to keep in mind. So projected expenditure. Like in any business, it's all very well hoping for turnover, but we can be sure of our expenditure to some degree. So from startup costs to frequent costs to rainy day costs. So startup costs would include the purchase of the vehicle, the initial vehicle license fee, the initial suitability inspection fee, the purchase of roof signs, branding, taxi meters. Of course, for taxis or wheelchair taxis only, Hackneys don't have to worry about that. Calibration and verification of taximeter, the fee for the driver entry test, something perhaps as trivial as that, you still need to factor it in, and of course the driver license fee and safety equipment. Frequent costs, fuel, cleaning and valeting, servicing, advertising and promotion, loan repayments, radio rental or affiliation to a dispatch operator. Occasional costs, SPSV equipment, all that ancillary equipment in your day-to-day running of the taxi, like your pen and paper, receipt rolls, safety equipment, spare parts, replacement tyres, etc. Recalibration and re-verification of the taximeter. when the national maximum taxi fare changes, or if your vehicle is changed. Annual costs, as we all know about running a car, especially an SPSV vehicle, the license renewal application fee, the NCT test, insurance, road tax, airport permit charges, if applicable. Every 5 years, you have to think about the driver license renewal fee. Infrequent costs, then, you decide how often your vehicle will need to be replaced. And the rainy day, the unpredictable costs, repairs, something comes up out of the blue. You need to allow a contingency amount to prepare for the unexpected. Now, building up and promoting your business. So hopefully you're off the ground. Whatever type of business you to set up, you've got to decide about how you design and promote your business. Market research is important in planning to set it up, but after you are up and running, you need to consider the following. What are your busiest areas and times? Are there any opportunities you can build on? What are the specific requirements or expectations of the different types of potential customers? Consider the entire range of customer types, from late night club and party goers to business people. Now, you can't beat customer feedback, as to what people are looking for in an SPSV service provider. Nothing like the horse's mouth. What are they currently happy with? What are they unhappy with? Or what do they feel is currently missing? Ask customers what makes them decide between one SPSV service and another. Who are your competitors? How well are they meeting their customers' needs? Can you provide a better service or fill a gap in a service? Can you stand out from the competition? What's your USP? Value for money, a comfortable journey for all passengers, safe and legal driving, clean, properly serviced, valeted vehicle, door-to-door delivery to wherever customers want to go. Whatever customers, the assistance they need, you can provide. And of course, a polite and courteous service. Advertising and promotion is important, no question. And it can help you stand out. So what are others doing in terms of advertising and promotion? How effective they are and where you might improve on what they're doing. So whatever type of SPSV you choose to operate will to a greater degree depend on how you advertise and promote your business. So if you're doing wheelchair accessible vehicles and that, you're going to be able to sell that. Let's look at some typical ways to advertise and promote a business. So newspapers, these local directories, sometimes from time to time, shops, notice boards, radio stations, local radio stations. Setting up a website can be a good idea, and maybe an online booking facility, and then linking it to associated specialist sites that focus on, for example, weddings or local events. Most websites now will help you land in hotel sites and things like that with their permission. Put your contact details on your receipt to encourage repeat business. Giving out business cards, always a good idea. Distributing flyers and leaflets to householders, businesses, and wherever your customers are. Advertising in publications, targeted commercial and public sector organisations. Arrange for an article or a feature about you or your service to be printed in appropriate papers or magazines, supporting and sponsoring local events and charities. If you have a taxi, you can advertise on your vehicle. This is not only a way of promoting your own business, but may also be a way of generating additional revenue from other businesses. Joining a local business network, telling everyone you know about your business and asking them to support you and to pass your name on to others. Let's look at more about running your own business. Now, so because it's largely cash-based, keeping the required records is relatively simple. Keep a manual or electronic diary to record daily all the weekly totals of your fares. Keep a record of everything you spend that relates to your business. keep all your receipts. A diary is also a useful way of recording incidents that could come under investigation by the NTA or the Garda. A written diary, we had this before, at the time of the incident is a far more reliable record than a verbal account based on your memory, and according to the NTA can carry more weight as evidence in court. Perhaps you can note in your diary reminders of important dates relating to your licenses. The renewal date for your SPSV driver license, well, you'll get that up to within 6 weeks. You'll get a 6 weeks reminder. You can do it up to 6 weeks before the closing date. The expiry date again of your vehicle license, that can be done up to 60 days. The renewal date of your insurance policy, the expiry date of your motor tax disc, the expiry date of your standard driving license, the expiry date of your NCT test certificate. These are good ideas because these dates can slip our minds. Now, to remain tax compliant. So, as a sole trader and a self-employed person, you must register for tax with the revenue, and you are obliged to pay any tax reckonable on your income every year by the 31st of October. So you must provide the revenue with details of all your income from whatever source. The NTA, as we know from previous chapters, they require you have satisfactory tax clearance status throughout the period of your license and to renew your SPSV driver or vehicle license. The NTA will share periodically information with the Revenue and the Department of Social Protection as part of its statutory function. Now, how to pay income tax. So you pay through the self-assessment system, and this involves submitting a return of your income each year, the amount by which your sales income has exceeded your costs, and then paying the appropriate taxes on that surplus. You're not required to submit annual accounts to the Revenue. However, you're required to keep a record of all income and payments, and you must include extracts from your accounts with your tax returns. Your accounts are subject to random inspection by the authorities for up to 6 years after filing. Now, under the Revenue's pay and file system, again, you must file a tax return online or by post by the 31st of October each year. And by this date, you must file your tax return for the previous year, pay any balance of tax due for the previous year, and pay your estimated or preliminary tax for the current year. So to avoid interest charges, the amount paid as preliminary tax must be 90% or more of your final liability for the current year, or 100% of your final liability for the previous year. So on the 31st of October this year, I must pay 90% of my final liability. Okay, up to 90%. And 100% of my final liability for 2020. Therefore, I will avoid interest charges. So for example, here we go over it again. I file my tax for the previous year. I pay any balance due for the previous year. I pay my estimated or preliminary tax for this current year. And to avoid interest charges, the amount paid as preliminary tax must be up to 90% of your final liability for the current year and 100% of your final liability for the previous year. Your tax liabilities include income tax, PRSI, USC, Universal Social Charge. Now, passenger transport services are exempt from standard VAT rules. You provide a VAT exempt service. This means you do not charge VAT on the service you provide. However, that means you're not entitled to reclaim VAT on any taxable business purchases. Motor tax, it's used, a vehicle that's used for SPSV, and no other purpose is eligible for a reduced rate of motor tax. A vehicle that is licensed as an SPSV but is not used solely for that purpose is required to pay the full rate of motor tax. Now, data protection, this is important. If you collect any personal information, such as customer contact details, you must not share it with anybody else, and you must use it only for the purpose for which it was provided. The collection and storage of personal information is regulated by the Data Protection Act of 1988 and 2003. So that's very important, that act. The Data Protection Acts of 1988 and 2003, that's how any data accumulation is regulated, and there is more information on the Data Protection Commissioner's website. That would also govern any CCTV use that a taxi might make use of. So just to recap, we've looked at the National Transport Authority's role in SPSV business operations. We've looked at planning to become an SPSV operator, selecting the right business model for you, we've spoken essentially about the sole trader model, promoting your business, and running your own business. So that is largely what this chapter has been about. So I hope this presentation has been a help. We can have a quiz to consolidate the information. It's also there on Quizlet. There's also the information there on Quizlet to help you through this. Thanks very much.